Welcome back to Let's Talk Careers. I'm so excited to bring another incredible guest. Today we are meeting with Dr. Andrew Woods, who is the founder of Ask Consulting Group. Welcome, Dr. Woods. It's great to have you with me today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So much to get into, so little time. I mean, whenever I speak with guests, I'm really excited about the journey of their career. But I know that for a young person or even a parent watching this right now, they're really concerned about the first step that their children or that teenagers will take. So I want to take you back to when you were a younger teenager and your academic interest at that time, as you described to me, was business and entrepreneurship. Now, I'm thinking, did they call it entrepreneurship when you were a younger person? Or is it now that you understand that it's entrepreneurship, but it was something slightly phrased differently before?
Okay. I think business and in particular entrepreneurship was something that was maybe not on trend when I was going to school. So you had one or two famous entrepreneurs, but you didn't have this sort of entrepreneur as the hero that you have in modern society. But we were taught in our business classes, and I wasn't a great student. I mean, I loved studying what I wanted to study and very often didn't want to study what others wanted me to study. But entrepreneurship was more like just business and business classes, and occasionally they'd give you like some kind of inspiration that maybe some person at the time that was famous was someone that you wanted to emulate. But I think entrepreneurship has come a long way in classes, whether it be in high school or university.
Tell us or take us through the journey of where you went from high school and how you made the choice onto post-secondary.
I actually, in my first degree, studied film, which had nothing. I kind of had this grandiose notion that I was going to be a producer in Hollywood, and I kind of had this dream. But I was always an entrepreneur. Even, if we want to go back prior to high school, I had a paper route, and then I wound up buying all the other paper routes, and I was like the paper route king of my my neighborhood. So I've always been entrepreneurial. So even the notion of studying film and film production, I then wanted to be my own kind of boss in some way. I knew that so young that that was something that I wanted.
And then I know that you evolved from chef to company owner. Tell us that story.
Oh yeah. So I left. I'm originally from Vancouver. I'm actually in the UK right now, but I'm originally from Vancouver, and I was kind of like floating around, not sure what to do. And I had paid my way through university the first time around by being a chef, stroke cook, bartender, everything I could get my hands on to keep body and soul together, to keep some money in my pocket. And one day I decided to buy a ticket to Ireland. My mother was from Ireland and I wanted to see my roots. So I bought a 2 week ticket, and that pretty much lasted 17 years. I traveled all throughout Europe in different restaurants, learning little bits of culture and language and, developing my culinary skills. And then when I got to the UK, where, as I mentioned, I am today, just on a visit, I realized that the customer service level was really low among hotels, bars, and restaurants. And I thought, that's it. I'm going to teach people how to give amazing customer service. And that evolved into like training, like back of house, front of house training, all kinds of. And then people would ask me, like, oh, we've got a call center. We'd like to do customer service there. So it kept evolving over time into basically creating legendary service, but also like helping people learn how to sell, helping people learn how to make presentation skills and gain confidence. Grew into quite a large company, which I sold in 2007, and then decided I was going to take another sort of entrepreneurial journey and jump into living in China because I had read so much about what was going on there. I wanted to be a part of that double digit GDP growth and all that excitement that was happening there. So that kind of started the next journey into more entrepreneurship, if you will.
So it sounds to me that you were living your life, but being open and adapting to opportunities as they kind of arose. It also sounded to me like you were beginning to understand yourself and beginning to feel like, hey, I can do that. Was this a skill that you learned along the journey independently, or did you have a mentor that was saying, hey, Andrew, you should take advantage of those opportunities?
One of the things I regret is that I did have, I won't call them traditional mentors per se, but people that offered me advice. And a lot of times when I was much younger, I was a little bit too arrogant. I thought I knew everything, even though I didn't know anything at the time, or very little. I didn't listen to people as well as I could. So it's only been in my sort of maybe early 30s onward that I began really taking advice. But if I can give any piece of advice in this presentation, take all the advice you can, listen anyway, be open to it, be receptive to it. And it might not make sense at the time, but if you really take the time to listen, it could be very beneficial.
So now I want to take you into your education.
Sure.
In the world of business, we have this assumption that it's more experience than it is academic knowledge. And those who go down that academic path tend to do it most likely to gain promotions, but going on to doing a doctorate
Mm,
doesn't always seem to be in that kind of, if I want to go into business, I definitely need to go into doctorate and a doctorate program. But you did. So take us through the story of how you made your academic choices. And I tell you why I
sure, of
asked
course.
you that question, because right now, young people are in this train of thought that I need to go to university and I need to get as many degrees as I can, because the assumption with that is that more degrees equal better job opportunities. But the reality is that's not always the case. So I thought that you could share with us the intentions behind every academic milestone you took, and if they were taken on autopilot or if they were taken with a clear intention.
Okay, great question. And let me try and break it down. So, autopilot for sure when I did an MBA because I'd sold my business and I didn't know what I was going to do with the remainder of my life, so to speak. Um, what happens sometimes in business, I had to sign an agreement when I sold my first company that I wouldn't do any of the similar activity for 5 years. So I didn't know what to do with myself. So I enrolled in an MBA, and it's amazing because all of the stuff that I was doing all along the way, it kind of solidified and gave me more structure and made me realize different models that I can apply to business. So it's not quite true. While I was doing the MBA, I still hadn't quite actually, when I think about it now, was in the process of selling. So I was still managing things and putting in. And I think those processes and those kind of ways of doing business really helped me along the way. But you asked about the doctorate. The doctorate came about because I was living in China and I had time on my hands. I mean, I speak the language a little bit. I speak Mandarin Chinese a little bit, but I was kind of like I was living with my wife and I wasn't into the expat, kind of scene or whatever. So I had time on my hands. A lot of people say they don't have time, but you can find time very easily. So I became really enthralled with how Chinese organizations operate as opposed to organizations in the UK, organizations in Canada, North America. And I wanted to compare and contrast those models. So this was more out of intrigue. You'll very rarely meet someone who says they did their doctorate because they were just bored and interested in something, because it's quite a labor intensive undertaking. But it was just so fascinating for me to dive so deeply into a culture that was foreign from mine and a business culture. And it also helps because I love teaching, and it's something that I've always done my whole career. Once I believe I was sort of established, I was always asked to be a part-time kind of adjunct lecturer, professor along the way, and I love it. So I thought if I have the doctorate, at least when my business days are over and I'm, you know, an old guy sitting somewhere, maybe I'm an old guy now, who knows, but I'm an old guy sitting somewhere, I've always got that opportunity to continue teaching, which is something I love.
Now I want to go into the audacious ask, your brilliant baby book. Show us this book. I know you have it
Yeah,
next to you.
sure.
And I love the name because it screams out, for me, it screams out, young person, make your intentions and don't play small. That's what it screamed out to me. That's what got my attention. And not just young people, I think anybody, but because I'm working
Anybody?
around helping young people, I always think of them first. But I think the audacious ask to me is kind of like, do I have permission to make that big request? First, tell us how you came up with the title of your book. Obviously,
Yeah.
Ask is the name of the company, but It's how you wrote it that really grabs my attention. And also how you take the book and bring it into the world with your audacious intentions.
Okay. Um, yeah, I mean, it really came from teaching. As I mentioned, I've been teaching all along the years, just a couple hours a week here and there at some great schools around the world. And one of the things I realized in a particular class I was teaching in BCIT, British Columbia Institute of Technology in Vancouver, is that students were coming up to me and they were saying, well, like, I'm looking for a job and I can't find one. And I would say, well, like, did you staple a Starbucks card to the CV and say, have a coffee on me and just take 5 minutes to review my resume? Did you put it in a FedEx so that you know that when there's 300 applications, yours will be the one that they definitely see? Like, did you ask for that meeting? Did you ask for that, whatever it might be? Like, did you it's just getting people to get out of their comfort zone. So my students challenged me. They said, well, if you're so great at asking, sir, why don't you ask? And they gave me a list of people that they wanted to learn from. And I contacted them all via LinkedIn, via other ways, just calling their companies. And they started to come in. So, and give like presentations via Zoom. And then when we were doing our textbooks, all the case studies, I would call up the CEOs or the people that the case studies were about and say, after we do the case study, can you come in and explain and listen to the students? So it took what was kind of a dull class and turned it into a really dynamic kind of session or sessions. But the book was more about like just interviewing these really incredible entrepreneurs and asking them when they asked, when they were kind of scared, but they pushed themselves to ask for a loan, to ask for an investment. When did they push the boundaries and do something audacious? And it's just wonderful. Like, it's just all of the feedback from these people is priceless. And I always say to students, just dream big and go for it. Nothing is too audacious to ask for.
What would you say is the number one obstacle that you've seen in young people that come through your classroom?
Fear, fear of the unknown, and confidence. Just getting that confidence. I mean, it sometimes scares me still to ask certain things from certain people, but the more you ask, there's a saying of, I'm Canadian, as I mentioned before, and there's a famous ice hockey player called Wayne Gretzky, and he said, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take."
Mm.
So the worst thing anyone can say to you, you ask for something, what can they do? They can say yes, they can say no, or they can counteroffer. And there's nothing, you don't lose anything. If they say no, you walk away, you dust yourself off, you ask the next person, you
Such a
know?
such a skill for life. Would you say that the book
Yeah.
is not just about business, but it's actually life skills as well?
That's a great point. I think, you know, I ask when I start sales training very often. I do sales training courses, and I ask people. I say, who's in sales here when it's a large group or a large class or whatever, and only a few people put up their hands. I say, no, we're all in sales. We're all negotiating. We're all in sales. When you're pitching yourself for an interview, when you're pitching yourself to go to a new school, you're always trying to persuade others that you're the right choice. So it's a life skill. Asking, being audacious, just being different from others, just taking that little step, which is such a big step, really, but just going for it.
As you're explaining this to me, I'm just thinking of the education system. And I know I might be getting off track, so feel free to reel me back
That's all
in,
right.
Andrew. But I'm just thinking about the education system and how it restricts young people from being audacious and asking. I mean, on the one hand, society tells them to stand out. And in the education system, they spend anywhere between 12 and 13 years of their life being told to stay inside the box, stay in line. I mean, it all starts when they're really young, one line, nobody come out of line. It's kind of like a subtle, we're suppressing them subtly. And to all educators watching this, no disrespect, but I do feel that part of asking is the fear of, am I allowed? It's like that permission. So when you work with clients or when you're doing your workshops or even teaching your students in your lectures, how do you convince them that they don't need permission to be audacious and ask, because I think they're so, it's implanted in them right from when they start school that they're not allowed to speak out, or they're not allowed to ask something that's out of line. So how do you unlearn, teach them how to unlearn so that they can learn to be audacious?
It depends on culture plays a big part in this. So when I've been teaching in universities or workshops in China, much different culture. So people are less likely to speak out. And there's this notion of saving face. So, people will know the answer to a question I ask, and they might not even answer, even though they know the answer. Whereas I think in North America, and maybe even in the UK, there's more of an element of uh, people being allowed to express themselves more. So I think it depends a lot on culture, but I've always found that, certainly in my classes, and something, no matter how often I say it, it takes certain people a long time to get it. But I always, and it's an old cliche, but there's no wrong questions. You just ask whatever you want. If you don't, and I will pull people behind afterwards, and I will say, look, you've got some great ideas. I see them on paper. Speak, let it out, tell us. I don't like putting people on the spot because I know that used to be devastating for me when I was a kid, or when I was a teen, or when I was, in university. I didn't like being put on the spot, but I let them know that my classes are open, that you can say and do whatever you want, and I don't discount your idea. If an idea is awful, I'll ask someone to expand on it more, and but I agree with you that we stifle creativity sometimes, and we stifle in the education system that notion of being that outside the box thinker. And that's something that's probably a lot bigger of a topic than what we can cover here. But I just try and let students know they can be open and just go for it in my classes.
So important, such an important skill. Would you say that entrepreneurship today, I mean, when we first began this conversation, you were saying, when I was younger, it wasn't really a trend,
No.
entrepreneurship, but it was still something that you were interested in. Now it just seems to be the buzz. I mean, when I think about employability, I can see why governments are pushing for entrepreneurship. It creates new jobs. It ensures that people, especially young people, are being more creative and bringing their best forward and taking ownership. I can see from a young person's perspective, entrepreneurship is their opportunity to be different, to really take their ideas, the ingrown leaders in them wanting to kind of stand out. But as an entrepreneur, I know it is not as glamorous, I think, as social media is making it to be. And any entrepreneur I've ever come across have always had an incredible story of resilience and how they've overcome it. But on social media, you're not allowed to really show that because A, there's not enough time, and B, people like to hear success stories. Unless you're at a certain level of influence, they really don't want to hear about the challenge. They want to hear success. So, what do you know about entrepreneurship that a young person doesn't know and are really going to be diving in head first without putting enough thought into it?
Okay. You hit on the social media part. I mean, yes, you go on YouTube and everybody's got their private jet and they're telling you how they make millions a month, and it's almost all fake. In fact, there was a guy in Vancouver who was called out on this, is that he was renting a big house and filming these videos and leasing a car. It was all fake, but he was selling a program of, you can get rich if you follow me. The guy was rich himself. So it's all this hype. Entrepreneurship to me is a journey. I love every day. I love my job. I love, excuse me, I love getting up. I love the challenge of each day. And money's a byproduct. There's been times where I haven't made a lot of money. There's been times where it's been frustrating, where some of my employees have been making more money than I have. Then there's been times like when you sell a business where you do, if you're lucky, you do make a large windfall or whatever you want to call it. But entrepreneurship is a journey. And I think what I love about it is it's the freedom. It's the freedom that I can be on a call with you. It's it's morning time here in the UK. Most people are going off to their jobs. I'm kind of on unexpected holiday while I'm doing a little bit of business here, I'll go back to Vancouver. I do a little bit of teaching and I do it on my terms. If I had a 9 to 5 job, I might have to say, hey, I got to leave at 2 o'clock and teach a class. No, you can't. You know what I mean? It's that freedom it gives you to explore and try new things. Excuse me. The money is just a byproduct. I'm not really interested in jets and, fancy cars, but, some people are. But to me, the money is a byproduct. The journey is what I love. And I learn every day. I learn so much more than I would if I were working 9 to 5. I'm convinced of that.
Definitely. So what would you say that a young person needs to be prepared for if they are going to take that leap? I'm sure you have students asking you this all the time.
They ask me all the time, and the thing that almost everybody seems to fear is failure. It's not failure, it's success. You're learning. When you're learning something new. So if you're 20 years old, you've got another 60, 70, 80 years left to go in your life. If your business doesn't work and you decide that you need to take a full-time job, that's not a problem. Enjoy the process and learn as much as you can, because it might be your third business that becomes the massive success. It might be your 10th business. It might be that you start off as an entrepreneur and then you go 9 to 5 and then you go contract. There's so many options for you. So take this notion out of your mind that if your product or service is not successful, that you failed. You failed if you have a dream and you've not attempted to seize that dream and go for it. That's a failure.
I completely resonate with that. I'd love to add to that if it's okay, in that I think sometimes
Please.
entrepreneurs are comparing themselves to employed people. And
Mm.
when you do that comparison, like you said, there's all these benefits to being an entrepreneur, but if we compare the salary to being the entrepreneur, it's almost, I mean, first, you can't compare it, but second, I don't know. I mean, I think it's like setting yourself up to almost fail, because you can't compete with someone working in a company and getting that regular income. I mean, unless you look at job security, and there is no job security. But
Anymore.
I think they do need more awareness of being an entrepreneur and what that reality is. So in your book, do you give us tips about entrepreneurship? What are some of the things that we can find if we read the book?
We find 8 really exciting and world-class entrepreneurs talking about their journeys, the ups and downs, when maybe they failed and when, most importantly, they've made that audacious ask to take them to the next level. So it's really all about them, and some of them. So we have a famous show in North America called the Shark Tank, which I'm sure you're familiar with. We have Shark Tank and the Dragon's Den, and I would just watch it. Speaking of audacious asks, I would watch it and I would say, that's a great pitch. And then Friday night, as I'm sitting there, I would write them saying, just saw your pitch, amazing. Would you like to be in this book I'm writing? Bang. They don't reject you, you know? So I had one or two say, I'm a little busy now. Can we look a few months down the road? Which is a partial rejection, but actually they were really busy. But it's all about even the process of the audacious ask was a series of audacious asks. So I got these wonderful people to tell their stories. And there's one guy in the book, Nazar Akil. He got an investment from a fellow called Mark Cuban on Shark Tank, who's a massive investor, a billionaire, massive investor. And he tells his story about, how he grew his business, but also he gives a little bit of insight into the Shark Tank itself and that experience. So fascinating, fascinating. And he's partnered with Shaquille O'Neal, a former NBA star. So it's just there's some real great nuggets to take out of this book. And a lot of people have written me and said, I've read your book and I've highlighted so many pages of kind of interesting quotes, entrepreneurs, giving some really golden pieces of advice. So it's wonderful and it's great when you get the feedback. We've had so much feedback, and we didn't expect this book I wrote for the students. I didn't expect it to sell like mad on Amazon. I didn't expect to have people from all around the world writing me. I mean, it's fantastic, and it brought us together.
Yeah, definitely. It totally brought us together. I'm going to bring this interview to a wrap, but before I do, I want to mention, or let's talk about your top 3 career tips. Your number one really stands out for me in that studying people. Tell me what
Oh
you
yeah.
mean about that and how this can help a young person or anyone on their career journey to take the next step in doing whatever it is that they're thinking about doing.
My advice to anyone is to take up 10 people that you truly admire and do a deep dive into them. Watch their TED Talks, read their biographies, understand what makes them tick, and even make an audacious ask and reach out to them. 10 people, that's it. Make that your goal in the next week. Do a deep dive, read about them, study them, understand them, and you will get valuable pieces of advice from each of them. You might not even meet them, but when you read about them and you watch them and you do a deep dive, you'll get so much power from that. I think it's an incredible thing to do for
I
anyone.
I absolutely adored that number one. I also think that when you're studying people, you begin to see different perspectives, don't you? Sometimes we kind of see things through rose-colored glasses. And when you're starting to study people's journeys, you begin to understand, wow, there's like a whole new way to be looking at this. When you study people, what kind of insights have you gained in your experience?
Oh, I mean, I study people all the time. There's one of the people in the book actually I've studied for years, and it's kind of odd because to say I study because he's a really good friend and a mentor. But he's traveled the world. He's a board of directors of EXP Realty, which is the biggest realty company in the world. He's a very successful guy, does a lot of philanthropy as well. And that's something that I'm very interested to. You get to a stage in entrepreneurship and I've been up and down and all around with businesses, but you get to a stage where you start to think to yourself, I want to give back. So I've learned from him how to volunteer my time, and I'm very generous with my time. But what happens is when I'm too generous with my time, it can become very frustrating. But what I've learned to him is how to compartmentalize and manage my time better, and also be more effective at giving things back and more effective at still running my day-to-day operations.
Okay, your number two, remember that you will have multiple careers as you have your entire future ahead. I can't agree with you more. And that normalizes for a young person at 16 and 17 that their first choice is never going to be their last choice. Now, parents tend to get a little anxious when their teens are making those choices. As you work with clients and as you travel around the world, what is the one thing you think that a parent of a young teenager right now needs to remember as they're helping them on that first career journey?
Well, I think exactly what we expressed earlier in the show, in which we said that I was mentioning that, you've got so much time on your hands and they need to understand that, happiness is very important. You don't want to be in a career that you hate for your whole life because it's painful. You want to bounce that, I jump out of bed every day and I want to be doing what I'm doing, which is an incredible opportunity. And again, a lot of people get caught up in this whole notion that, well, if I do this job, I'll make lots of money, but you can have lots of money and be very miserable at the same time. So my kind of advice as a parent and to parents would be to let your let your children explore and maybe find what they want, but that might not be what they want for the long term. So be flexible. And I know it's hard because I'm a parent too, and you think to yourself, oh, it'd be great if my daughter was a doctor or my daughter was and that's the route she's chosen to go down. But at the same time, I think that parents should be more open to letting their children explore different things along the road. So use university. A lot of university topics are just there to give you a window on the world and let you sort of find your own way, and then you pick a career after that. So I think a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of understanding that you can be run a business as a YouTuber, or you can run a business as a social media person, and those might be things that a parent doesn't quite understand. But let their children live their life, and that's hard as a parent sometimes. But
It
I think
is.
that
It is
people
so
listening,
hard.
any students listening, would appreciate that comment. But let them live their life and explore, and try new things. Maybe dabble in entrepreneurship, whatever they want that makes them happy. The key is to be happy in life. You have one life, you know.
It is so hard. I feel for parents. I'm a parent myself, but it is really, really hard. And my final is your top number three, top three tips. How do you keep a positive attitude when things feel challenging? Because you say always keep a positive attitude and you'll go very far. That's a hard one, isn't it? Especially as an entrepreneur or a young person thinking of entrepreneurship.
You have to look at, you need to, first off, I do this a lot is I try and put things in perspective. You know, I live in a city that's ranked as one of the top cities of the world, but it's also very rainy and gloomy in the wintertime. But I look out my window and it might be raining, and I think to myself, I live in a wonderful country and a wonderful place. I'm happy with my situation. I'm luckier than most people and enjoy it. And I would imagine most of your students are in similar scenarios. But you have this precious opportunity, which is life, that so many people don't understand on a daily basis. Like, you're lucky to be alive. You're lucky to have this opportunity. So try and make the best of it and be the best person that you can be, whether it be at your job, whether it be whatever you're doing. And I think that if you surround yourself, so I surround myself with people that are positive, people that are, running marathons, climbing up mountains, raising funds for people, people that are like go-getters, but also positive to be around. Some of my friends are less ambitious, but positive. I don't let any negativity into my life because negativity breeds negativity. You need to, as hard as it can be, you need to cancel the people in your life that are causing you to bring you down, you know? You just need to surround yourself with positive people, and that will bring about positive energy in your life every time.
That's a hard one, but I agree. I think it is very important to be consciously aware of the things that you have that sometimes you forget you're so lucky to have. Definitely very,
Completely.
very, very interesting. But I think it's a journey, isn't it? Sometimes it's easier and sometimes it might just feel a little more of a workout, I would call it.
Yeah, it can be hard. I mean, you can have gloomy days and bad reports on your company, and it can all come at once, and that can be a struggle. But like I say, always have people that you can turn to that are bright sources of light that will say to you, like, this will pass.
Yeah.
You're going to get to the next stage. Believe in yourself, believe in opportunity. Opportunity comes to those that seek it. Opportunity comes to those people that are positive and go for it. It doesn't, the grandiose lifestyle in the BMW that people want. It doesn't just come. They don't just park it in your driveway and say, there you go. You got to work and you got to surround yourself with positive people and just go for it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here with me today and taking us on this journey. So much to learn. We definitely could keep you going, but I'm very conscious of the time. So we're going to bring it right to a close. We learned so much. If you are just tuning in right now, this was an incredible interview with Dr. Andrew Woods. We talked about his career journey, how he found his way from being a teenager to his current role as the founder of Ask Consulting Group. And of course, his amazing book. Show it to us one more time so we can have a good look at it. Where can we find it? I heard you say Amazon. Where else?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's in select bookstores in North America, but it's on Amazon. So I would recommend that anyone that wants it, grab it. And just on the topic of the Audacious Ask, reach out to me on LinkedIn if you want to connect and have any questions. I'm more than willing to answer and connect with you.
Fantastic. Thank you everybody for watching, and we will see you at our next Let's Talk Careers with Ms.V.